Good day, everyone. We want to encourage feedback, questions, and discussion around the topic. You can type a question and send it to us through the questions panel. There will be time at the end of the webinar for questions as well. Today's topic, Criticality Assessment, is co-presented by David Porrill, Principal Global Advanced Services at Blue Mountain, and Vinny Hall, Principal Reliability Engineer with Catalent. I would like to turn it over to our presenters to introduce themselves to our audience.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending where you are in the world. As Chris says, my name is Dave Porrill. I will be presenting part of the webinar today. I work with Chris in Blue Mountain in the Advanced Global Services team. I'm a mechanical engineer by qualification. You see some of my accreditations on the screen there, which I've accumulated over my 35 years in industry. Of those 35 years, approximately 19 have been spent in life sciences across a couple of different companies. The industries that I've worked in started off in the beer industry for about 11 years, followed by pharmaceutical. I spent a few years in the sugar industry, also a short stint in biofuels, and a few years in the consulting world as well. My whole career has been in or close to the world of maintenance and reliability. That's what I do, that's what I know, and so I suppose that's my area of specialization. That's me in a nutshell, and I'll hand over to Vinny.
Good day, everybody. My name is Vinny Hall. I'm a Principal Reliability Engineer. Here today with Dave, co-hosting in support of Blue Mountain. Got 21 years of experience in industry, industries such as food, oil, pharmaceutical, life sciences, typically for the last eight years. Many different roles in maintenance and reliability positions, all levels of the organizations, from the shop floor right up to senior management. So vastly experienced. I've gone through this process many a times and here to share my experiences with the team today and the audience today. Thank you.
Thanks, Vinny.
Okay.
I would like to kick off today's webinar with a quick poll for our audience here, and we appreciate your participation in this. So the question is, has your facility done a form of criticality assessment to rank the importance of each asset/system to the overall business? Getting a lot of response here, which is great. I appreciate the participation. So it looks like predominantly we're getting a good amount of percentage on the yes side. We're in the 60 percentile range, with somewhere around 20% saying no, and about 18% right now saying unsure. I'll give it another second for everybody to vote. And looks like that we're settling out, and I'm going to close the poll now. So there are results. So there you have it, Dave and Vinny. 64% are doing some form of criticality assessment at this point, with 18% no and 18% unsure. Turn it back over.
All right. Thank you, Chris. And there we go. All right. Well, that sets the scene. It gives us a bit of background to build on as we go through the presentation today. So for some of you, this kind of approach will not be new, but nevertheless, I hope that it is going to be useful. Just before I give you a quick overview of Blue Mountain, I do want to say that this approach to doing a criticality assessment is not a proprietary Blue Mountain product. Yes, we are Blue Mountain and we are happy to bring you this, but it is really just sharing knowledge of a methodology that can be used to determine the criticality of your assets. Okay, there are other variations on the theme that you can find if you research across industry. This is one that we have found works well. It's easy, it's structured, and hopefully it'll deliver results that are going to be useful for you. So just a few words to give you an overview and a background to Blue Mountain for those who may not be familiar. The name Blue Mountain applies to both the company and the software system that we produce. Blue Mountain is a leading developer of asset management software and services for the life sciences industry. We focus specifically on life sciences and strive to ensure that our product is the system of choice for companies operating in this industry sector. So just a few notes about the Blue Mountain RAM system. RAM, for those who don't know, stands for Regulatory Asset Manager. We often refer to it just as RAM. The package combines functionality for calibration, maintenance, and asset management into one integrated system. The latest release, which we're rolling out, is currently hosted in the cloud. One of the features that we're particularly proud of is that the software comes fully validated by Blue Mountain. This validation package has withstood the scrutiny of the FDA in hundreds of customer audits over many years. To date, the RAM system has been implemented in well over 1,000 facilities worldwide and still growing. Blue Mountain RAM ensures the integrity of your data and compliance with the FDA's good manufacturing practices. We use a GAMP5 approach for qualification and validation of automated systems to ensure that the software solution remains scalable and compliant. And finally, we provide not only an extremely capable software solution, but we support this with a world-class customer experience and in-house support from our technical team. So the webinar today is brought to you by our advanced services team. Together, we have extensive industry experience in maintenance, reliability, and EAM systems, which means that we can help our customers leverage the features of Blue Mountain RAM combined with industry best practices to optimize their asset management programs. Okay, so that's just an introduction to Blue Mountain. Straight into the agenda for today. The title of the webinar, as you know, is Equipment Criticality Assessment Process. And so the sections we'll be looking at, firstly, the purpose and reasons why we do criticality assessment. Then we'll look at the steps of the criticality analysis process, recording the analysis in Excel, scoring and ranking, and we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So I'll take the lead to start off and then hand over to Vinny after the first section. We'll start off by looking at the background and purpose of criticality assessments. Now on the screen, you see a graphic which I refer to as the Reliability Excellence Temple. It's not the only one. You can go onto Google and search and you will find many different variations of the same sort of thing that show the different foundation stones and pillars that are required to support the mantle of reliability excellence in a facility. I like this one. That's why I choose it. And to start off with, I just want to point out where criticality fits into all these components and pillars that are required to support reliability excellence. And it really fits into those two pillars that you see on the left, which are surrounded by the yellow border. So those are work management and preventive and predictive maintenance. That's the area of maintenance and reliability where criticality finds its home. So the purpose of a criticality assessment is to provide an analytical framework that will allow site teams to determine the relative criticality of equipment and systems within their production and utilities areas. And the orange words, relative criticality of equipment, those are the important ones. It's not an absolute, but it will show you which systems and equipment on your site at your facility are more important and less important to the business. The process we will show you considers a range of factors to determine the overall impact to the business. It ranks all systems and equipment that you put through the analysis to show their relative importance to the site. The end result is they are grouped as high, medium, and low criticality. So the end result sounds fairly simple, but it's a very useful technique. Let me not run ahead of myself, but we'll go and have a look at how we do that in just a moment. So why do we do it? Well, there are four main reasons why we do a criticality assessment. The first one is to determine a relative ranking of system importance. And I emphasize the word system in the sentence. That can be used as a guide to guide us on the level and extent of analysis to apply when we're developing system maintenance strategies. It's a guideline. And firstly, we rank our systems in order of high, medium, and low. Then secondly, it's to determine a relative ranking of equipment importance that is entered in the CMMS and used to prioritize maintenance work. And note in the second bullet, we're talking about equipment. So first systems, and then equipment. The third point is to aid in equipment redesign or replacement options when it comes time for us to consider those. And then fourthly, it can also be used to support spare stockholding strategies. So a number of different reasons why. It's a very good thing to do and a very good starting point, or shall I say, initial step for us to take. And before we look at the process, Chris, we have our second poll, please.
Certainly. Our second poll is, what approach have you used to design your equipment maintenance programs? Responses are coming in. Just give it a little bit more. We have about 65% voted. All right, couple more seconds. We're going to close it out. We have 75% voted. Anybody who wants to get in on this, please do. All right, so our results, we had a 75% of our audience voted, and here are our results. So looks like we're pretty close from, we only use manufacturer's recommendations, as well as we use a combination of approaches for different systems.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. Oops. There we go. All right, so interesting to know that because this slide talks about the maintenance plan development process. And the purpose here is really just to show where criticality fits as a first step that feeds into the development of your maintenance plans. Now, in the red block that you see in the center of the slide, that represents a typical analytical process or methodology that many sites, many organizations will use. And RCM is a very popular one, FMICA is another, and there are different variations. Now, if you're using a process like RCM or one of those thorough analytical methodologies, it is very often split into two parts. The first part, as you see with the little number 1 next to it, is where you would identify functions, failures, modes, effects, those kind of things, and maybe a risk priority number. Then the second part is where you take that initial information, and from that you build on and develop the maintenance tasks. So I call those part 1 and part 2 of your analysis. Coming out of that, you'll develop the job plans, and from there you build up the whole maintenance schedule with the dates and timing for when those activities are going to happen. So back to the yellow block at the top, which represents your criticality assessment. As I said previously, once you've done the criticality assessment, you will rank all your assets in terms of high, medium, and low. Those which rank high would follow the arrow on the left-hand side from the yellow block, and that indicates that for the high criticality assets, you really want to take those and run them through the full extent of your analytical process for developing those maintenance plans. Because they are high criticality assets, you want to be sure that you do the most thorough job you can of building up a comprehensive maintenance plan for those assets. For those which come out as medium criticality, they would follow the arrow down the center portion of the slide. The recommendation here is that it's probably not necessary to go through the full scope of your RCM or FMICA analysis, but you can probably jump in just to part 2 for developing those maintenance tasks and follow on from there. Those systems which are ranked as low criticality, well, they would follow the arrow on the far right-hand side, where it's probably not worth doing a thorough analysis to develop those maintenance plans, but you can probably simply build up your job plan details and your tasks based on local knowledge and good engineering practice. So that's just to show where criticality provides the starting point for developing your maintenance plans. Now, I will refer back to this slide later on. So just capture that mental image for the moment, and we'll look back at it when we get further on in the presentation. So the criticality assessment is based on risk. So just a few thoughts here about assessing risk and how we go about preparing for the criticality assessment. First, the formula for calculating risk is up at the top there. Risk is impact multiplied by probability. And you will hear those words come through this presentation a lot today, impact and probability. And on the next slide, I'll explain a bit more about those two terms. So the approach we will show you today reduces subjectivity so everyone can agree with the results. It does not allow one person to shout loudest and therefore their opinion wins. It needs to be a team-based approach to reach a consensus of opinion. So the first few steps when starting your criticality assessment, first you need to establish your criticality team. Again, team-based approach. It's important that the people in this team have a good overall representation of what happens at your facility from a production, maintenance, quality point of view. We need to identify the assets that are going to be included in the study, which is normally the full scope of everything at your facility. We define the factors and categories that are going to be used, the weightings that will be given to each of those factors or categories. We then go through the scoring process for all the systems and equipment, and we group them into the criticality levels and determine their risk. All of that will become a whole lot more clear as Vinny takes you through the process. Let's pause for a moment and look at impact and probability. I'm going to show you 4 little cartoon graphics that come up on this slide to show the difference between those terms and what it means to the calculation of risk. The first one, imagine there's this little chap who's got to cross over a channel in the ground. In this case, we see that channel is narrow. You can probably step straight over it. It's not very deep, so there's not far to fall. But what's more, you see the little blue step in the middle is a stepping stone that he can use to get across that channel easily. So the risk of him falling into the channel is low, because if he falls, the impact is low because the channel is only shallow. The probability is also very low because it's narrow and easy to step over. Secondly, it's a different channel. In this case, the impact is also low because the channel is not deep. There's not far to fall. There is also the blue bridge, which forms a walkway to cross over. The probability of falling into this channel is therefore high because of the width of the channel. He's got to be careful because he's got a long way to go to cross over it. So low impact, high probability. Number 3 shows a very deep channel with spikes at the bottom that could inflict harm to this chap if he were to fall into it. So the impact of falling into the channel is very high. He would become injured. The probability of him falling in is very low because the channel is narrow, and like number 1, he could probably just step straight over it. So 2 and 3 show us medium level of risk. At number 4, in this case, the channel is deep, the channel is wide, there are dangerous spikes at the bottom. So the impact, if he were to fall into the channel, would be very high. You can see by the little skeletal remains at the bottom. And there's a very high probability of falling in because there's no bridge that he can take to walk over. So impact multiplied by probability means that number 4 is very high risk. Hopefully that's just a simple graphical illustration of those 2 factors and how they come together to give you an overall risk rating. Okay, so the final point that I want to go through just before handing over to Vinny, we need to be clear about the definitions of function and failure, because these are terms that come into our analysis repeatedly. So just to explain the way in which we use the terms here, the function of an item is the job that we want it to do, meeting a specific standard of performance. And for any system, we can identify primary functions and secondary functions. The primary functions are the main reasons why the component or the system exists. They define its operation with measurable standards of performance. Then the secondary functions are usually less prominent, less well known. There are other things that the item does in addition to its primary function. On the other side of the fence, a failure is the inability of an item to provide the desired function. Now, that could happen because it happens too much, or too little, or none at all, depending on what the process requires. Every process needs to operate within certain parameters. And if sometimes you can do too much of a good thing, which causes problems. Sometimes it's not enough, according to what the process requires. So a failure is not necessarily a complete inability to operate, but it simply means that you're not able to provide the desired function that is required by the process. So, thinking about functions, for criticality assessments, we're going to consider primary functions only. Just think about the main reasons why this system exists, the main job that we want it to do. If we start digging too deep into the details, we're going to get hopelessly lost. And that's not the purpose of a criticality assessment. Okay, right now I'm going to hand over to Vinny, and he's going to talk you through the steps of the criticality assessment process. So Vinny.
Thank you, Dave. Welcome, everybody. So firstly, in terms of the criticality process, we're looking at 2 sets of factors, as Dave mentioned, impact factors and probability factors. The impact factor, identify the impact factor to the business and the operations of the equipment if it fails. And the probability of failure, that how vulnerable are we that the machine will be down or out of service, and what is the impact of the business? How often does it fail? What data and information do we have to support that also? Having identified the factors used in each of these groups, scoring levels set for each of these factors. So both impact and probability. Next slide, please, Dave. The impact factors typically seen on many criticality assessments across industry. Many consultants, many reliability engineers have used many different ways of getting to the same outcome, different and slightly varied approaches. But in this instance and this example, the impact factors, we've looked at health and safety, environmental, equipment availability, hours lost of revenue, and impact of product quality. If the machine fails, what will be the impact to each of these individual impact factors? And then moving on to probability factors. What does the machine mean time between failure? What does it mean time to repair, equipment utilization, and the annual maintenance cost? Looking to budgets, looking to your CMMS systems, reliability data. And in some instances, you may ask the question of, we don't have this data available, this information we don't have. Using engineers' experience, the team's experience from your safety departments, quality records that you may have, there's other ways of leveraging information and people's experience. So not having the data available doesn't mean that you still can't perform this assessment. It just means it's not going to be as accurate with data. However, it is still a useful tool. Okay, spreadsheet layout, strong levels is shown on the next slide as we move on. So this tool, which yourself and David are sharing today, I've used many during my time in reliability roles, leadership roles, coaching roles, and supporting roles. Many criticality assessments just focus on the impact factors and don't always take into consideration the probability factors. But just in this template, in this example that we're using, on the left-hand side, you list each of your assets. And then going from left to right, we look at the impact factors to begin with. As you can see here, health and safety, environmental, equipment availability, hourly loss rate, and product quality are our impact factors. And we go through a process of scoring each of these individual criteria. And the same for the probability factors. So this is just an overview of the template. Okay, next slide, Dave. So for each of the categories, we need to look at, for instance, our example, health and safety factor. They need to be weighted against your organization. So we break them out into different levels. So you see here, for environmental health and safety, we've looked at no risk as level 1, minor risk as level 2, serious risk, severe cuts, broken arms, requiring hospital treatments as level 3, level 4, a lost time injury, severe life-changing injuries, and level 5, fatalities, and in some cases multiple or single. Okay, so we need to break each of these out, scoring and ranking. Next slide, please, Dave. So as mentioned, different organizations, different business units, they will have different impacts based on your organization. So these are our examples. This is what we have used, and this is what we're here to share today. However, these are not set in stone. They should be applied to your site. You should review them with the team, the core team, and that can consist of health and safety, quality, engineering, calibration, operations. Each of these teams would have an input into these weighting factors. So we're agreed on what these scoring levels would be. And the same with probability factors. If we have data that we can apply, we have some rationalization, we come to an agreement as a team of how we're going to weight each of these standard scoring levels. Okay, next slide, please, Dave. Okay, so going through the process of scoring, for each of those weightings, we give a 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes in some cases 5. We've now listed in each of the columns here the impact of what we agreed as a team, and we are going to score each of the assets based on that impact. So, for example, if our first health and safety scoring is 1 with minimal impact, no injury or no record, we scored it as a 1, and we move from left to right. Each of these individual criteria are scored. It is a multiplication and gives us a total impact score. So to the left-hand side, you can see the impact factors are all multiplied by each other in order to give us the impact score. The impact score is independent of the probability score. So the impact factor will not change day-to-day operations. It would require a significant change, an upgrade of plant, change in process conditions. The impact score will never change. That's not the case with the probability score. Depending on how you apply your maintenance strategies, how reliable your equipment is, your critical spares, if they change. These numbers can be heightened or reduced on a second phase or your third phase of criticality scoring when you revisit this after you've done some target focus work on the output of your criticality assessment. But the probability factors, again, left to right we score, multiplication, and we get, on the right hand side, we get a probability score of failure. Okay, next slide, please. So here you can see in our example, there's some we've listed some assets we've listed down the left hand side. We've scored each of them on the individual categories for impact factors, and down the center of the image we have the impact factor total score, which is a multiplication of everything to the left. Probability factor, again, they've been scored, and just to the right hand side we have their total score. So Dave, I think you need to move on slightly, and here we then take the impact factor total score and the probability factor total score and multiply them by each. Okay, and that gives us a total score, which we're able to organize from highest to lowest. Move on to the next slide, please, Dave. And then we transition this into a Pareto, and we have this waterfall effect, the graph illustrating what we can see is clear steps. So to the left-hand side, we have a red high criticality assets. In orange, we have our medium. And in green, we have our low. You can see from the waterfall effect that there's a step showing a clear cut-off point here, where we would, as a team, we would agree and we would apply the high, the medium, and the low category based on our scoring, based on the step changes. What we would do is review as well, part of the team. We would take some examples and review some of our assets that we have scored to make sure that they are suited. We are happy with our scores and they are appropriate to our business. We don't want to find that we have misscored something incorrectly, and one of our most productive assets, our biggest failure rate asset, has fallen into the lower criticality domain. Okay, Dave, next slide.
And we're going to jump into our third poll for the webinar.
Okay.
Excuse me. So the third poll question is, do you have a CMMS/AIM system for managing your maintenance activities? We'll give it a minute or two for everybody to have an opportunity to answer. Some interesting response. I get to see the numbers kind of moving around as the response is coming in, and it is very interesting as well. We have 71% voted. We'll give it a little bit more, give the rest of the audience opportunity. All right, looks like we've kind of plateaued, and we'll share the results. So interestingly, 66% say yes, we use it extensively, which is very impressive. Yes, but we only use it to a limited extent is 21%, and 13% replied, no, we don't have a CMMS.
Very interesting. Thank you, Chris, and thanks everybody for responding. Vinny, this is still with you then.
Yes, no problem. Okay, so categorization. Assets can be classified in order of criticality, A or 1 being high. The machinery and equipment whose failure will have a major impact on our business and serious consequences. B or 2 being medium. Machinery or equipment whose failure will have a direct effect on the business, not as severe as a high. C or 3 being low, assets that will have an indirect support or secondary process machinery or equipment, loss of the equipment have little to no effect on the business. So from the scoring, if we classify each asset as high, medium or low, we would like to transition that back into our original spreadsheet. And Dave, if you can click on this to the illustration. the far right-hand side of the spreadsheet, you can see just to the right-hand side of our total score, dependent on a high, medium, or low categorization, we would apply that letter, illustrating the category of what that asset has fallen into on the right-hand side. Okay, Dave, if we pivot back. Also, a very important piece of the assessment, feeding that back into your CMMS. So, as we mentioned, 60% of our viewers today are people who have attended the presentation. I'd ask the question of, do you feed that back into your CMMS? If so, great. If not, I'd highly encourage that. Allows to drive your maintenance approach on your equipment, prioritization of maintenance work orders, and helps with future assessments that you'll have on for reliability assessments at your facility. Okay. Any items that are not scored or included in the assessments, we would mark them in the CMMS as unclassified. Okay. Important point. Just some general guidelines across industry. Ratios to keep the balance across the three bandwidths, high, medium, low. Many people consider all of their assets highly critical, but not in all cases. And having this scoring approach, this criticality assessment, that allows us to communicate to the business a structured, analytical way of defining our most critical versus our least critical. However, the high band should consist of no less than 5%. And no more than 20% of your overall assets. Again, these are typical percentages. Your medium business criticality, your essential assets, are no less than 20% and no more than 50% of your scores for medium combined assets. And then on low business criticality, you should have no less than 30% and no more than 75%. If we fall outside of these typical percentages, we'd encourage to review the scoring, the approach of which has been taken, and the initial impact scoring criteria of what you set out as a team. That will be my recommendation, just to make sure that it is balanced, that it is appropriate to your facility. And on that note, Dave, is anything you'd like to add on top?
No, thank you, Vinny. I think that's well explained. Thank you very much. We can move on to just some final thoughts. So, through all the criticality assessments that Vinny and I have done over the years, a number of times people ask questions. And one of those questions is, what happens if I have too many assets? This is going to take me forever to complete this. But usually a criticality assessment should be done at the same level that we do maintenance, and that's typically considered to be equipment level. However, depending on the size of your facility, a site may have hundreds, thousands of equipment items. To have 5,000 equipment items on an average size facility is not unusual in the life sciences industry. So in order to keep this process manageable, here's what we suggest. We start at system level. And again, an average type of site, maybe you'll find there's anywhere between 50 up to 100, 200 systems. The system being a collection of equipment items performing a unit operation. So keeping at system level, follow the process that Vinny has described. Score and rank all your systems into high, medium, and low criticality. Then take just the high criticality systems. I don't know, using my average numbers, maybe there'll be around 20 high criticality systems. Take those and break them down to the equipment level. And then for those equipment items, repeat the analysis. Shown graphically, rank your systems, take your high criticality systems, break them down into equipment items, and repeat the analysis for those individual equipment items. For everything that came out of your original analysis, your systems that are ranked as medium or low criticality, I recommend you just leave those and all the equipment items in each of those with the same ranking. So if it's a medium criticality system, leave all the equipment items in each of those systems also as medium. And the same for your low criticality systems, leave all the equipment items there as low. It's not worth the effort for you as a business to try and go into any more granular detail. But for the high criticality systems, it often is worth that extra effort. So it's worth going down to the equipment level and repeating the analysis. I'd just like to show you very quickly a different approach to the overall ranking. The first approach is what we've seen already in the presentation, where everything is captured into an Excel spreadsheet and the scores are multiplied under the impact section and under the probability section and then multiplied together, as Vinny showed you. There is a different approach. This is fundamentally the same logic. However, some people like to see things represented graphically because that speaks to them in an easier to understand way. If you're one of those people, you can easily use a matrix like what you see on the right-hand side. So going back to the spreadsheet, if you take all the impact factors, which were under the yellow headings that Vinny showed you, and rank them high, medium, low under the impact section, and we look at that at the top right-hand corner of the slide, you see the impact factors there. So high, medium, low, or A, B, C, as it is shown in the 3 columns of this little matrix. Then take the probability factors, which were under the green headings on the spreadsheet, rank them into high, medium, low, and feed them in on the left-hand side, which you might call P, Q, and R for the high, medium, and low. Then it's easy to see that where you have a high impact and a high probability coinciding, you're in the red area of the matrix. Similarly, low impact score, low probability score, you're in the green area of the matrix, and amber being that diagonal band through the middle. I just offer it because some people like to see this sort of visual representation when they get to this stage of the analysis. Now, for your most critical assets, just referring back to that slide that I told you about before, having rated the assets, the ones that are most important, highest criticality, are then subjected to that further detailed analysis. And if I call up the slide again, you remember I told you about the RCM or FOMICA analysis. The high criticality assets would be put through level 1 and 2 of that process to develop your maintenance plans. However, for your medium criticality assets, you probably only put them through the second half of that analytical process because it's not worth the effort to put them through the full, thorough, rigorous approach. Alternatively, use review existing maintenance or manufacturer's data to optimize the planned maintenance and determine the best maintenance approach. And for the lowest criticality assets, simply use review existing maintenance or manufacturer's data, or alternatively, apply basic cleaning lubrication tasks only, or in some cases, simply operate to failure. So the important thing here is don't sweat the small stuff. Put the highest amount of energy into the most critical assets because that's worth it for your business. And that brings us to the end of the formal presentation. I'd like to ask Chris to come back in and let's have a look if we have any questions that we can respond to in our remaining time.
Certainly, Dave. So let's start with the first question. This came from Stan, and we can unmute you if you'd like further clarification on your questions. Just please let us know, and we'll go that direction as well, unmuting you, and then I believe you have to unmute yourself as well. So Stan's question is the criticality changes if we add redundancy for one equipment? So I'm reading that, Dave, as, you know, if it's N+1 down the road, does that criticality change because you now added redundancy?
I could take that, Dave, if you like.
Go, Vinny.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of part of your project onboarding of new equipment, I would encourage to build into your process some procedures to review the criticality study. This is a live document. It's something that you should review when retiring and introducing new equipment, whether that's just a dual, duplicates, or additional redundancy, I would consider to be reviewing that as part of your onboarding project process.
Thank you, Vinny. I would add to that as well. If you think about the questions, Vinny showed you that the questions could be, if this equipment fails, what would be the impact on productivity, for example, was one of those. Now, if you include your redundancy, that you've got a backup piece of equipment, it changes the picture, because now if the equipment fails, what would be the impact? Well, maybe there's no impact because you can switch over to your spare one. So it will definitely change your score, and that will probably cascade through into an adjustment or a different overall ranking.
We also had a very encouraging number, Dave, of people who've already completed this or similar process. That's the question of when was the last time it was revised. Typically 3-year cycle. It's good to get into a routine, an organisation of just reviewing what you've already done. Again, that's another encouragement. So a lot of people have scored assets, and things change, and projects do get introduced similar to this recent question. As an example, highly encouraged to review, revisit, and rescore based on changes to the organisation on a periodic basis.
Great. Second question that came in. So I'm going to read this to you both. This is a fairly lengthy question, so I'm going to go a little slower on this one because it is lengthy. I recognize that the risk assessment process serves as a means to develop maintenance plans. Is there a method of integration for this process to fit within the ISPE guidelines for impact assessment pertaining to qualification and instrument criticality assessments related to calibration? All three processes necessitate the formation of teams, often composed of the same members, who usually lack the time to separately engage in each of these processes individually.
That's a great question. Let me take that one. Yes. Look, the approach that we've shown you here today is a guideline. You can use it just as a standalone process, simply as we've explained it. But we're not necessarily locking it down to just these 4 walls. I know and I recognize that it would be very helpful if you could somehow expand the structure and the extent of the methodology to be able to make use of those same people around the table at the time, to be able to cover the different bases with instrumentation, criticality that were asked in the question. And I forget the first part of the question. Anyway, the point is, yes, you can adjust the structure of the analysis to be able to ask and answer the other questions that are required for the other purposes. I think the important thing to watch out for, though, is just make sure that you're doing the right thing for the right reason. You've got to be very clear. Which questions are you asking and which responses are you gathering to give you the answers you need in each of those different categories? So if you're looking for just the overall importance to the business, then you'd ask the selection of questions that we've been talking about here today. If you want to, Chris, just remind me from the question, there were 2 other parts that the person was asking about.
Sure, and I'll read the full question again for you, Dave. So I recognize that the risk assessment process serves as a means to develop maintenance plans. Is there a method of integration for this process to fit within the ISPE guidelines for impact assessment pertaining to qualification and instrument criticality assessments related to calibration? All the 3 processes necessitate the formation of teams, often composed of the same members, who usually lack the time to separately engage in each of these processes individually.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It was the impact assessment piece that had slipped my mind. Again, if you want to identify the impact under that impact assessment heading, you will utilize the answers from some of the same questions, definitely, and you'll certainly use many of the same people. Again, I say be careful and just be clear about what it is that you're asking and what you're hoping to achieve, because there will be some overlap with some of the questions, but you're looking to achieve a subtly different set of answers that will probably be captured into your CMMS or equivalent system in a different field or in a different way for a different purpose. So that's a bit of a long answer to a long question, but I think the basic response is yes, it can be adjusted to have a broader scope, to be able to utilize the time and the input of those people more efficiently. But you just need to be very careful about how you structure the spreadsheet so that you're capturing the right information and consolidating the right responses in the right way. Otherwise, it could be easy to trip over yourself and find that the waters are becoming muddy and you lose clarity if it's not structured in a careful way. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Dave. The other, Dave, if you can just, while we continue this, go to our next slide, as you know, we're getting close to the end of the webinar, for the QR code for everyone to be able to scan that QR code. And, you know, this is so that you can get availability to the download tool for the criticality assessment. So some of us were asking around that earlier, and as well, the webinar will be made available to the attendees for this session. We have recorded this. So, Dave, a couple other questions that have come in. There was mention of too many assets falling into the high criticality, or, you know, that perception of everything's critical, right? And I know there was some gauging I saw on that slide that you presented. The question's really around if we come in over that percentile of high criticality, is that possible? Can more than, say, 50% of our assets be highly critical? That's really the gist of that question that came through.
Sure. Okay, again, I'll take this one. Yes, the answer is yes. Again, I use the word guideline. The process and the structure that we've shown you here today is a guideline that has served many companies well across industry, predominantly I'm talking life sciences. And so that's why we offer the recommended bands, the scoring bands that Vinny showed you, so that not everything is critical. Everything can't be the same level of criticality. You're going to have some things that are more important than others. That's why we break down the analysis with all of those different factors and all of the different criteria in each factor. If you end up thinking with the results showing that, I don't know, 50, 60% of your equipment is in the high criticality band, as Vinny said earlier, I think just go back and do a sanity check. Just double check to make sure that you've applied the rules and the criteria and the answering correctly, fairly, and objectively. But I'm not going to say that it's wrong. I'm going to say you've got to do the right thing for the right reason and for your facility. Every facility will be different. So what we've shown you here today is a general guideline. And we want to help you make sure that the results you get have been considered in a fair, balanced, objective way. And if at the end of it, you still believe that 50% of your assets fall into the criticality band of high, okay, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to say that it's wrong. I'm just going to say that that would be unusual. You probably find that you can find different cutoff points for the high to medium and the medium to low structure, or should I say banding, based on the waterfall diagram that Vinny showed you.
Dave, another point to add to that would be not all criticality assessments include the impact factor. There have been some that I've used in the past where that has not been, the probability factor.
Yes.
So in some cases, I'd review your current criticality assessment to see if the probability factor is included, because all your assets may be as critical as each other in a larger sense, a larger volume. However, they may not all have experienced the same failure rates. So, and how long the downfall and the downtime that is included in your CMMS. So using this tool could benefit you in segregating and going into that minutiae, that additional data that will give you the granular understanding of your equipment and give you a more an accurate score by individual asset rather than them all falling out at the same. Hope that's useful. It's just something I'm sitting there processing in my mind. Again, as Dave mentioned, reconsider the scoring criteria that was mentioned earlier in the presentation.
Excellent. And just being respectful of time, I know we're coming on to the hour. There's one last question that we have, should be a fairly short answer. Vinny, I'll ask you, if you could respond to this one. So the question is, from a cross-functional departmental side of things, what would the team comprise of to do this type of assessment? Who would, kind of be sitting at that table?
So I'd be looking at a quality personnel. I'd be looking at someone from operations. I'd be looking at someone from safety, someone from engineering, a minimum.
Excellent.
What I missed, Dave? What I missed? Someone from calibration, if you don't include them in maintenance. Well, I do.
No, you've got it, Vinny. That's it. You've got to have people who are able to provide an input to give a clear answer to each of the questions that you've got on the spreadsheet. And you've got it, Vinny. That's it.
Okay. And your CMMS is an additional point. Make sure that you have either the CMMS or some additional supporting data, failure data that you may have at your site. Okay.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. The recording from today's webinar will be made available for Blue Mountain customers in the Blue Mountain Help Center. We will also be sharing this webinar on LinkedIn in the coming days. This concludes the webinar. We thank everyone for joining and participating during the session.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Chris, for moderating.